This steel block survived a century of abuse, yet no one knows what half its holes actually do. Blacksmiths guarded their anvil secrets jealously, and most of this tool's true purpose died with them. There are V-shaped notches cut deep into the edges, and the corners taper into rounded anvil points. If you found this rusting in a barn corner, you might think it was scrap metal, something to haul away for recycling. But to the blacksmith who owned it, this single piece of cast iron was worth more than most of the other tools in his shop combined. Most people today have no idea what this was for, do you? This is a swage block, and it was the blacksmith's secret weapon for shaping metal into forms an anvil alone could never achieve. Every hole, every groove, every depression was a different die. Need to forge a perfect half-round rod for a stair railing. You'd heat your iron cherry red, lay it across one of those semicircular grooves, and hammer it down until it took the shape. Making a ring, thread your hot metal through one of the round holes and bend it true against the curve. Those V-notches along the edges were for forming square stock into angles, and the flat surfaces let you true up sheet metal or flatten twisted bars. A good swage block might have 30 or 40 different forming surfaces, and the blacksmith knew every one by heart. He could glance at a job, wagon wheel repair, or a decorative fence commission, and know exactly which depression or hole would give him the shape he needed. The swage block disappeared for the same reason the small-town blacksmith shop did. When factories started mass-producing standardized metal parts and farmers stopped using horse-drawn equipment, there was no more call for custom ironwork in every county seat. The swage blocks got left behind, too heavy to move, too specialized for anyone but a blacksmith to understand. Right beside that swage block, hanging on the forge wall, you would have found a tool that looks almost comically simple. It's a length of steel bar, maybe a foot long, with a rounded or wedge-shaped head on one end and a flat shoulder that tapers down to a stem. This is a fuller, named after the Old English word for a groove maker, and it was how a blacksmith could stretch and shape hot iron without cutting it. You'd set the stem of the fuller into the hardy hole in your anvil, that square socket in the anvil's face so the fuller stood upright like a blunt chisel. Then you'd lay your red-hot iron across it and hammer down. The fuller would press a deep groove into the metal, and here's the clever part. That groove let you bend the iron precisely at that spot, or draw it out thinner, or create a decorative line that ran the length of a piece. If you were forging a leaf design for a gate, you'd use a fuller to create the central vein. If you needed to taper a rod without hammering for an hour, a few passes over the fuller would move the metal exactly where you wanted it. Blacksmiths often worked in pairs, and they had top fullers too, handled tools they'd strike from above while the hot iron rested on the bottom fuller, squeezing the metal between them like a waffle iron squeezes batter. The fuller vanished along with the hand-forging trades, replaced by hydraulic presses and rolling mills that could shape cold steel with thousands of pounds of pressure. The hardy was the fuller's cousin, and it fit into that same square hole in the anvil face. But where the fuller shaped metal, the hardy cut it. Picture a small hatchet blade sticking straight up from your anvil, edge gleaming and sharp. That's a hardy. When you needed to cut a bar of hot iron, you didn't saw it or grind it. You'd hammer your iron against that upturned edge, rotating the bar and striking it from above with your hammer, until the hardy sheared clean through. A skilled blacksmith could cut iron as easily as you'd slice warm butter, and he'd do it all day long without dulling the hardy's edge because he was working hot metal, not cold. There were different hardies for different jobs. A straight-edged hardy for clean cuts, a curved hardy for trimming round stock, a side hardy that clamped to the side of the anvil for special angles. Together with the swage block and fullers, the hardy helped the blacksmith work like a one-man metal factory, cutting and shaping without ever stopping to change out a saw blade or wait for a machine to heat up. The hardy went the way of hand-cut iron. When cutting torches and powered shears came along, you could cut cold steel in seconds, and the young men who might have learned the blacksmith trade went to work in fabrication shops instead. After all that hammering and shaping and cutting, The blacksmith needed his metal flat and true. That's where the flatter came in. It looks almost like a small handheld anvil, a flat steel face on the bottom and a slightly rounded top for striking. The blacksmith would lay the flatter against his work and tap it with a hammer, using the broad face to smooth out hammer marks and create a level surface. Think of it like ironing a shirt, except your iron is steel and your shirt is red-hot metal, and instead of steam you're using carefully placed hammer blows. The flatter was essential for finish work, the kind of details that separated a master blacksmith from an apprentice. A gate hinge needed to be flat where it bolted to the wood. A wagon tire needed to sit flush against the wheel. The flatter made that possible without overworking the metal or leaving a peened, dimpled surface covered in hammer dents. Old-timers could swing a flatter so precisely, they'd leave metal smooth as glass, ready for the customer with barely any file work needed. When welding and machining replaced forge work, the flatter became obsolete. Modern metalworkers just grind their surfaces flat, or they mill them on a machine that holds tolerances a hand-forged flatter could never match. None of these tools mattered, though, if the blacksmith couldn't hold his work. And that's where his tongs came in. Walk into an antique shop and you might see a dozen pairs of blacksmith tongs hanging on a wall, each one shaped differently. Long, thin jaws for gripping round stock, wide, flat jaws for holding sheet metal, odd curved jaws that look like they were made for some alien geometry. Every shape of tong had a purpose, because you cannot forge metal you cannot hold, and you cannot hold red-hot iron with your bare hands. A blacksmith might own 20 or 30 pairs of tongs, each fitted to a specific size and shape of stock. He'd grab the right pair without thinking, the way a mechanic reaches for the right socket, and those tongs became an extension of his arm. The long handles kept his hands away from the heat. The jaws, carefully forged to match the work, held tight without slipping even when he hammered hard enough to shake the building. Sometimes a blacksmith would forge custom tongs just for one job, a complex piece that needed its own dedicated grip. Did your grandfather have a pair of these in his shed? Tell me below, because every old farm seemed to have at least one set tucked away, long after anyone remembered what they were really for. To hold larger work too big or awkward for tongs, the blacksmith relied on his leg vise. This wasn't a delicate tool. Picture a massive iron vise, jaws 6 inches wide, mounted on a post that ran all the way down to the floor, sometimes 10 feet down into a buried stump or a block set in the earth. The long leg gave the vise incredible strength. You could clamp a wagon axle in those jaws and hammer on it all day, and the vise wouldn't budge. The leg also acted as a spring, flexing just slightly to absorb the shock of hammering, which saved the threads and kept the vise from shaking itself apart. Blacksmiths used the leg vise for everything from holding work steady during filing to securing pieces for punch work or bending. That long leg, sunk deep into the ground, connected the blacksmith's work directly to the earth itself, making the whole shop into one solid mass. When the blacksmith shops closed and the forges went cold, those leg vises were often left behind. Too heavy to move, too specialized to sell. You'll still find them sometimes, bolted to a beam in an old barn, the jaws rusted shut, the leg disappearing into the dirt floor. All these tools, the Swage block with its mysterious holes, the fullers and hardies that fit the anvil like puzzle pieces, the flatter that smoothed what the hammer roughed in, the tongs shaped for every task, the leg vise rooted to the ground, they were the vocabulary of a language most of us no longer speak. The blacksmith trade nearly disappeared because the world it served disappeared first. Horses gave way to tractors and cars. Wagons gave way to trucks. Hand-forged hinges and latches gave way to mass-produced hardware you could order from a catalog. The men who knew how to read hot metal by its color, who could judge a temperature by the shade of red glowing in the forge, who could swing a hammer 8 hours a day and create beauty from iron, those men got old and their sons learned other trades. By the middle of the 20th century, The small-town blacksmith shop was already a relic, and these tools became mysteries, strange objects rusting in estate sales, their purposes forgotten. But they were real, and they built the country we inherited. Every iron fence, every wagon wheel, every hinge and hook and railing was shaped by hands holding these tools, and those hands knew things we've mostly forgotten. Like this if it took you back, and subscribe for the next forgotten tool. The workshop never really closes.